Hi everyone, I'm Karen with Walsh and welcome to my home studio. This is a video that I shot some time ago and I thought I should edit it and get it together to show you. It's using two types of clay, marbled cone 6 stoneware, a white stoneware and a black stoneware. I will put the links in the video description, but you can see that this creates a great marbling when you throw them together. Now in the case of the cup that I'm doing in the video, I couldn't actually figure out where I put that cup, so I have another cup that was similar to it. So this is not the exact one that I did in the video, but it will give you an idea of how I did it. So it's a lot of fun. I do this because a lot of my kids, I have a Pick a Passion project at the end of the semester that I do with my students, and one of the options that I give them is doing marbled clay. So some of my wheel throwing kids, the more advanced kids, want to try some marbled clay, and it's really pretty easy and kind of fun. You just have to make sure that your clay is the same moisture when you're combining them. So drop me any questions that you have below, and don't forget to subscribe, and stay safe, stay healthy, and keep potting if you can. So the first step that I do is I'm going to prep my white clay and my black clay. Now students, if you're using this, make sure that you're closing the bags up again when you're done, because we don't want that to dry out for the next person. Now, each of the clays need to be wedged. So in the case here, I'm actually prepping clay for other things besides the cup that I'm making. So I wedge each of the clays, the white clay and the black clay, and the big takeaway that you need to have is they have to be really of very, very similar moisture. If one is stiffer than the other, this just doesn't work well for throwing. So I first of all sandwich them. So I have a layer of white, black, white, black, white. As you can see, I'm dividing it, the white into 3 pieces, the black into 2 pieces. I'm sandwiching it, and then as I wedge it together, I really only give it maybe half a dozen turns. You don't want to over wedge or you will mix it. So just half a dozen turns, or maybe that was a little bit more, but you want to get that incorporated together. So as you begin throwing marbled clay, the first thing that you will notice is that you get a slurry of slip that mixes together. So it's going to be the black and white mixing together. It makes it gray. Now, as I said before, you have to make sure the clay is the same moisture, because if you don't, as you center, it's not going to center evenly. And students, just like centering anything, always make sure that the base of the hunk of clay is centered where it meets the bat. If that is not centered, you're never going to get a centered piece. And on this piece, my clay is going to be just ever so slightly different in moisture, and it does tend to pull slightly unevenly, but you have to have a really steady hand to help compensate. But it's very similar in moisture, just not totally exactly the same. So as I pull, again, you get a whole bunch of gray slip, and I will be removing that. So once I get it to the final height, then I'll work on scraping the slip off. So I'll just do my final pull here, and then I want to get the puddle out of the inside, scrape off whatever slip I can with my sponge. And then the next step, I'm going to take an actual scraper. So I'm using the small little metal mud tool scraper. You can use anything that's going to scrape. You don't want to just compress. You want to physically scrape the slip off. Once I did the inside, then I do the outside. Now notice you cannot put your hand on the opposite side of the wall, because if you do, you're going to mess up your marbled with the slip again. So as I do this, I have a little bit more on the upper edge, and I probably should have trimmed this edge slightly, but it turns out it's fine. I'm now going to scrape the slip as best I can off the edge. It does not leave a super smooth edge. It leaves kind of a rough edge that I'll end up by having to clean later, because whenever you rib over an edge, it's not super smooth. And I'm holding that rib. Notice I'm holding it at really a perpendicular 90-degree angle to the side, because I want to scrape that off. And then lastly, I am going to trim off the base with the little wooden knife, and take off that extra. And again, just like any time when I go to remove something from the bat, I need to make sure that I am cleaning my hands well. If I have fingerprints of slip on there, that's something I'll have to clean off again later. So I clean my hands off with the towel that I have on hand. And I'm going to trim or cut the bottom with the wire, making sure that the wire is pressed firmly against the bat all the way down. Okay, one more time, probably dry my hands, and then lift, and I'm letting that get leather hard. Now once it's leather hard, I'm going to trim. You can trim using whatever mechanism you like. I just happen to be using a sticky bat right here, even though it kind of moves on me every once in a while. Trimming the exterior of the foot first, and then I'll do the interior of the foot. And this trimming will also reveal the marbled. And again, just trimming the last little bit there. And after it's trimmed, now I want to do a little bit of what's called fluting. Some people might call this faceting, but I think they're different. Fluting is a round carved, it's like fluted columns on, architecture. So I'm using the rounded end, and it's almost like I'm cutting a potato or peeling a carrot. I am using my thumb as a pivot point, so I have a nice long continuous draw. This takes practice to get the hang of a nice consistent draw. But again, this is done, of course, when it's leather hard, and I do it after it's trimmed. So that reveals the various layers of the striations of clay on the inside. Now I'm going to use some of the scrap, and I think that's just scrap trimmings that I had used and I moistened and made a coil out of. And I am going to do a pulled handle for this because I really do like pulled handles. So I make it a carrot-shaped coil first, and then I flatten it. And as I flatten it, that's going to be the top and bottom. And then I'm going to find the least attractive spot, and I place the handle there. If you ever have a spot that has a blemish and you can put the handle on that side, it allows people to not notice the blemish as much. You kind of hide it. So I firmly attach this onto there, and it does have an upsweep right now because I want the handle to kind of sweep upward. So I had it at an angle. The end of it was at an angle, and then I just take and I blend the bottom ever so slightly. Now I let that sit for a few minutes, probably 10-15 minutes before I am doing this part. Now this part is the pulling, and so for this I wet my fingers. This is just, I have many videos on how you can pull a handle, but this is I wet it, and then I just gently squeeze front and back and side to side. So periodically I alter the position of my hands. So I'm squeezing front to back, side to side, and I'm slowly trying to get this clay to stretch into the thickness that I need it to be. So this is not really a super fast process. It does take me a few minutes. You can tell I've sped up, but it's a slow stretching. So by continuing to add water, it prevents friction, and I'm trying to control the width of it side to side by wrapping my fingers around it, and I'm trying to control the thickness of it and stretch it to a thinner, more comfortable thickness. Now for the attachment, you can see it has an upsweep. For the attachment, I score and slip, and I had to put my mask on because a student walked in. And then I'm going to take, adding just a little bit more of a pull there. And then I'm going to take that and press it down on the bottom. Now I'll dry my hands off again. And then I'm going to really adhere that well by kind of squishing it on the bottom a little bit. And then lastly, I'm just kind of reshaping it. By squeezing it in, I kind of change the profile so it doesn't stick out too far, and it gives me a little bit more room at the bottom for like your bottom finger. Now this has sat for an hour or so, and it is leather hard. So now at this point, I want to scrape off the slip that was on the handle. That's a little bit more time consuming. Again, I have this sped up. But by scraping this, I'm going to be getting off the gray slip that is hiding the marbled, and sometimes I use maybe even some little tools to get in there to do that. So I'm using just some of those little Kemper ribbon tools, and I'm also going to switch to using a cushiony surface. So here I have a piece of foam rubber and a towel that I have laying on it. So there I am just again, cleaning away that gray slip, trying to reveal the marbled clay so you can really see it. Just cleaning up all my attachments. In this case, of course, I'm not using a paintbrush and water because I don't want to create any more slip. And there is the cut layers. You can see the marbled, still a little bit of slip that was in the bottom there, but that's looking pretty good. And after the cup dried slowly, I did bisque fire it, and then I dipped it in clear and fired it to cone 6. That is a coyote clear that I use with those two stonewares.